And well, good morning, everybody, and welcome. Thank you so much for coming to today's Climate Advocate Training Workshop. It's just really great to have you here. And we'll get going here, and give me a second or two to organize. And I'm Don Kraus. I'm one of your presenters today, and I'm just grateful that you're here. Before we get officially started, if you could just introduce yourself and let us know where you're joining from by typing your city in the chat window. And you tell us how you heard about Citizens Climate Lobby and if you are connected with a local chapter. So if you could put that in the chat, that would be great. And I want to thank you for joining Citizens Climate Lobby's advocate training here on this fine Saturday morning. I'm so grateful that you're spending some of your time today on climate, and that's wonderful. Before we get started, I just want to acknowledge that taking you away from your family, your friends, or your hobbies to work on something that's much larger than ourselves is just wonderful. We're extremely grateful. We also want to give a shout out to all of our attendees calling in and doing critical work, building political will for climate solutions. And I particularly want to thank our host committee for all the work and helping organize this event. So a big shout out to Curtis Basinger from Nashville, Mary Lagan from Tennessee at Large chapter, Jeff Lair, our Memphis chapter, Fred LeMay, our Williamson County chapter, Shelley Stallman, our Northeast Tennessee chapter, Sherry Williams, our Knoxville chapter, and also to John Clark, our regional coordinator, who will also be our co-host today, and Curtis and Mary, who will be presenting with me. So thank you so much. If you want a copy of today's slides, the link is up there for you at it's a bit.ly/CCL-TN-CAT. We'll put that in the chat for you so you can always come back to these slides. And so we will get going over here. So first, a little bit of housekeeping today. Except for during the breakout and the question and answer period, everyone's going to be in listen only mode. To rename yourself, just find your name on the participant list at the bottom of your screen. It might be on the top if you're on an iPad, and hover your mouse over your name until the more button appears. Click on it and rename will appear. So let's go ahead and rename ourselves by putting, you put the name of your town you're from before your name if you'd like. And then if you need help renaming, just put your hand up, your Zoom hand up, which you could also find under participants or under reactions, depending upon your Zoom version. And John can give you a hand with that. If you're video conferencing with us, the best sound quality, please close all your other programs besides Zoom and close open browser windows. Otherwise, you may get a little kind of robotic voice. And if all of your browser windows and programs are closed and your audio is bad, then your internet connection may not be strong enough for video conferencing. And if that's the case, you have two options. You could dial in by phone. The number was in your confirmation or reminder email, or you can watch the presentation after it's emailed to you tomorrow or probably Monday. We'll have time to devote for your questions at a couple of points, but if you can't wait, you want to remember it, just put it in the chat and we will try to get to it as quickly as possible. So let me introduce our presenters today. So today we have three presenters today training, and our Zoom host. My name is Don Kraus. I've been with Citizens Climate Lobby since 2015. I'm currently one of the Tennessee state coordinators, and I am doing this work as a volunteer because climate is just so important. It's so important for everything in our world, and it's where I need to put my time and energy Although I'm a Tennessee State Coordinator, I live in Asheville, North Carolina, about an hour over the mountains, but I just love working with folks in Tennessee. So thank you all for being here. And let me pass it off to Mary for you.
Thank you, Don. I'm Mary Legan. I am the volunteer chapter leader of Tennessee's at-large group. We are a home for anyone who doesn't live in a city that has an active CCL chapter. So we welcome everyone, and I hope to see some of you in the future. I've been with CCL for about a year and a half, and I love volunteering with this organization and showing up for climate solutions.
I'm Curtis Basinger. Can you all hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Good. I actually co-lead the Nashville chapter. And like Mary, I've been with CCL about a year and a half. I actually came to CCL after reading Spencer Work's The Discovery of Global Warming. And looking around for a climate advocacy group, I realized that CCL was probably the only one that had a deliverable product that actually had a framework by which it could be instituted. Not only that, I get to work with a bunch of great people, and so I've had a lot of fun the last year and a half. Thank you.
And John?
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm John Clark. I'm a regional coordinator for the Appalachia region. I'm actually up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And I'm happy to be joining you guys today. So thanks for being here.
Okay, well, let's use the chat to find out more about each of our attendees today, too. So find the chat button on your Zoom screen, click on that button, and then please chat, where you live. Put in your city and state, and want to say, I'm most committed. What are you most committed to, and because? So if you could put that in the chat now, and we'll read a few of them as they come on up. I'm going to put one in here too. John, can you read some of these for us?
Yep. Wow. Okay, let me see here.
Hey, John, I've got one. We've got Norma, most committed to the environment. We've got Shelley from Roan Mountain, Tennessee. Thanks, everyone. We've got someone from Franklin working to make democracy work for us. Nancy in Nashville, thanks for joining us. Sam says this is his first meeting with CCL. Sam, we are so glad to have you. Good morning, Beth. Committed to climate change and being an urgent issue that can bring us together across the political divide. I love that. Denise from Franklin, committed to environmental justice. Wonderful. And here's Justine, committed to teaching environmentalism from Knoxville. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for introducing yourselves. And Don, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, so we know many of you are newish to CCL, and so many of you are taking this training to get prepared. So you'll be part of our June lobby experience with your members of Congress. So, and as a result, in this training, here's what we'll be covering. So we'll do some of the basics of climate science, CCL's organization structure, our values. We'll talk about how citizens create political will and the tools that we will use to create political will. We'll talk about our methodology. We'll do a lobby training, which will be really, really good. And then we'll have some more discussion on the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, a key element to address climate change that meets the scale of the climate problem in the time frame that we needed to. And so with that overview, let's get started. Before we talk about Earth's climate, we want to do a quick little poll here. So John, can you take care of that? So if you could just quickly, just let's respond. How familiar are you with the signs of climate change? And it's a multiple choice. You might know the basics. You might know more of the issue than most of the other folks. You might be totally up on the stuff. So let's just see. It's coming on in now. We'll wait another minute or so on this.
Looks like we have a wide
Okay.
range of expertise here.
That's right. And it looks like most of us know more of the issue than a lot of folks. That's just great. That's great. Okay, so why don't we then get into this climate a little bit, and let's go here. So, we know that the Earth gives off heat and energy in response to the sun's light. But heat-trapping gases like carbon dioxide are mostly opaque to heat energy, so that they absorb the heat energy before it escapes the atmosphere. And this is the natural greenhouse effect, and it maintains the Earth's temperature at more than 60 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than it would otherwise. And we need this naturally occurring greenhouse gas effect to maintain the conditions for humans to thrive. And the problem is, though, that we have increased the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere by at least 43% since pre-industrial times, and that over 100% for methane. And, so this gives us the artificial greenhouse effect. And it's that artificial greenhouse effect that we are most concerned with. So if you take a look at this graph from the Mauna Loa Observatory in Hawaii, I had a chance to go there once, but this little squiggly line over here is the increase in carbon dioxide, at least in my lifetime and in many of yours. And we have just seen it going up and up. The little squiggles are the seasonal variations that we have on it. But if you take this time, which is my lifetime, and then you put it into the amount of time where they've been actually able to, using ice cores and little bubbles of air in ice cores, be able to track the carbon dioxide in our world, you'll see that over here that it just shot straight up. It was kind of in the same range for hundreds of thousands of years. The highs are our interglacial periods, the lows are our ice ages, and it shot right up. And so this is what has been happening. And so if you take this time of all these years, and you can see we have this historical range, and then we have what's happening now. Back when I was in business, boy, if I saw a chart like this and it was my profits, I knew we were doing great and it was awesome. And if it was my expensive, I knew I was out of business. So for us here on Earth, we have a choice over here. We have a choice. Do we keep down to a very low scenario and we keep this as close to this increase that we closely have so we don't go more than 1.5 degrees centigrade as an increase, or does it go way high up? That's the choice that we have to make, and that's what we work on, is to keep it at the bottom end of this range. And we know that the biggest driver is fossil fuels, coal, gas, oil, that since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution has just been increasing and increasing and increasing. And as a result, we have climate change. And so here in Tennessee, what does that mean for us in Tennessee? So Curtis, if you could read from chats, and if people could put in chats examples of climate change in Tennessee that you have observed. We've had these floods that's on the left-hand side, which were from Memphis, fires in Gatlinburg, in Northeast Tennessee and other places. We've seen these terrible landslides that just closed off roads. So what are some of the things in your life that you've seen here in Tennessee that is really making a difference?
Well, I see right now that Lisa has put in the chat that she's seen more frequent and violent tornadoes. And certainly if you live in northern Alabama, that's for darn sure. We've lost bridges twice due to flooding. Norman Morrison puts that in from Rome Mountain. And how likely would that have been in the last 10 years compared to the centuries before that? Mary puts in that there's been wildfires in Gatlinburg. When was the last time the Smoky Mountains National Park burned, other than recently? For example, here in Middle Tennessee, the number of days with dangerous heat have risen from approximately 10 per year to nearly 55 per year. And by contrast, the number of days with heavy precipitation greater than 3 inches has increased in most stations throughout Middle Tennessee. For example, here in Middle Tennessee, we had the wettest February on record in 2019, followed by the driest October on record in October of 2019. Jeff puts in the chat, he recently lived in Florida during disaster management during their record historic string of hurricanes, of which I believe 4 struck their state in the last 4 years. So many examples of what that means for us here in Tennessee.
Okay, which brings us to Citizens Climate Lobby. And so let us tell you a little bit about us. So Mary, I want you to talk about some of our values.
Sure, Don. We often talk about the CCL way of doing things, but what exactly does that mean? What are Citizens Climate Lobby's values? As CCL is growing so quickly, it's key that all of our thousands of supporters are on the same page. Our values are something we use to guide our decisions, like how we respond to others. They're like a home base we can return to. CCL recognizes 7 core values that are essential to our identity: integrity, focus, optimism, relationships, personal power, being nonpartisan, and diversity. So let's explore each of these briefly. Next.
Well, let's just say that we in CCL are laser focused on a carbon fee and dividend as a way of affecting climate change. Now, many others work in the climate change space. Several environmental groups do. However, we don't allow their work or our support of it to divert us from this main focus. We want to support our core purpose. Next slide, please.
We believe that people are good and that democracy works. We're confident that our approach will work because we see progress. We stand for a solution, not in protest of other solutions. We're a community that offers one another comfort, support, and fun as we work.
Now, we take a generous approach to other people because we want to build relationships with them. We appreciate what they say. We look at them with respect when they speak to us, and we endeavor to find common ground upon which we can decide. Our goal is to provide consensus in this space. Consensus so that we can provide a carbon fee and dividend at a national level. Next slide, please.
We're prepared to do our research, and this is where integrity comes in. We're always on time for our meetings, and our approach is thoughtful and thorough. We can consult experts, and we use data. We're open to new information. In fact, we solicit opposing opinions.
Now, here at CCL, we are volunteer driven. We train volunteers to advocate for a carbon fee and a carbon dividend. And this simple act transforms each of us from being a spectator to an engaged citizen. We attempt to develop these things because that's best for getting our message and our goal achieved. Next slide, please.
We empower everyone in exercising their personal and political power, regardless of race, ethnicity, nationality, gender, gender identity, sexual orientation, age, religion, ability, or political affiliation. We seek out, support, and elevate people whose voices may not have been fully heard. Next.
And it's just Mary alluded to, we are nonpartisan as a result. We don't particularly care what political stripes you wear, who you voted for in the last election, where you live, or what you do for a living. As a result, we work with elected officials with whom we politically may disagree. We believe everyone, including these people, are an ally in our attempt to provide a carbon fee and dividend. Next slide, please.
CCL's executive director, Mark Reynolds, always says we're betting the ranch on building relationships. To focus on building those relationships of trust, let's explore the CCL concept of looking for common ground. That's the key to any long-term relationship, and it's critical for our success when working with Congress. When we look for common ground, we start in 3 places. First, we're going to look for shared values. Examples of shared values include caring about the future of our children, our grandchildren, your nieces and nephews. Other shared values may include religious beliefs or the desire for a safe and prosperous future, or even energy independence. The key is that if you have a value you share with your member of Congress or their staff, be sure to emphasize that during your interaction. Second, we look for social connections. For members of Congress, we find out about former jobs, schools, interests. For an aide or staffer, we can simply ask them to tell us about themselves. This is not just being polite. These are things we really want to know. If there's a hometown or a college connection, we are going to make it. And it gets them talking about themselves instead of us lecturing them. And finally, common ground can also be literally a patch of ground on this earth, our turf, a place we love, or the member of Congress or staffer loves. We found that no matter who we talk to, people love their home and the community and the larger world passionately. So in a little bit, we'll jump into an exercise to get us thinking about using our stories and experiences as a basis for common ground. And Don's going to talk more about that right now.
So at Citizens Climate Lobby, we focus on what we want to solve the climate crisis. We want a livable planet. And in this exercise, we get down on the ground exploring what you want to preserve. And a quote from E.B. White will help frame our exercise. And before I read it, open your chat and tell us, who is E.B. White, if you know? And who's E.B. White? Anyone know? Author? Yep, he's an author. And what he wrote Charlotte's Web, right? Exactly. Stuart Little. Okay, guys, you guys are great. Okay. That's right. He also wrote the Elements of Style. And so let me read this quote for you here. And to set this all up, he gave an interview in the New York Times in 1969. And he said, every morning I wake up torn between a desire to save the world and an inclination to savor it. This makes it hard to plan the day. And we at CCL might add, but if we forget to savor the world, what reason do we possibly have for saving it? In a way, savoring must come first. So let me repeat that last part. If we forget to savor the world, what possible reason do we have for savoring it? So even though there may be some differing opinions with whom we talk to about what's causing climate change, or just how it happened, we could all agree that there's something special about this earth and that we all want to be around and have a very livable earth. So what we're going to do is, in this exercise, we're going to do in just a minute, we'll ask you to identify a specific place that you love and that is threatened to be negatively impacted by climate change. We're not talking about generic type places like the beach, nor do we mean to focus on a place that is threatened by other environmental factors like overdevelopment or toxic pollution, but let's specifically key into how climate change is and will impact the place that we care for. So if your hometown and congressional district, if it's in there, it's all the better to help establish that common ground. And the reason that we ask this is that social science research has shown people connect much more strongly with their own backyard and concerns for their community than for far off impacts. So if you think about what your place looks like, sounds like in your mind's eyes, you know, to paint a picture for us is what it's like using is a descriptive imagery, as you can help us really understand what you savor about it. If possible, tie in the potential impact of your local economies that your community faces as well, you know, reduced worker or an agricultural productivity, extreme heat, drought, wildfires, inland flooding, disease vector expansion, seafood yields. There are just so many ways to make your story personal and connected to common concerns like the natural world and well-being. So this exercise is a way to really begin developing a story that you can share with others. Stories are the very powerful means of connecting with people, and the more prepared we are to share and make a personal connection, the more likely we are to really to find that common ground. So, and let me give you an example. And you can write this down if you want to, or you can just think it in your head, because you're going to get to share it with each other in a moment over here. So, like I will tell you, you know, what we do is we want to consider what we love about life. You know, maybe family traditions or a special spot in nature, perhaps music, art, poetry, a certain way of life. And so let's record what we love about life on Earth, describing it in great detail. So, you know, let me share one with you for me. For me, my family, you know, we grew up in skiing and we love to go cross-country skiing. And for me, I remember just the feeling of being early in the morning out on the snow on cross-country skis, where it's just quiet. Sometimes you're breaking that first trail. There's snow up in the trees, clinging to the leaves and branches, and just the sound of your skis on the snow is making the little snowflakes come down and sprinkle around you, and it's just magical. And there's this place up in New Hampshire where when I was a kid, we would go cross-country skiing all the time. And each year now they are seeing their business decrease. I remember cross-country skiing on the Blue Ridge Parkway here in North Carolina. And we haven't had that ability to do that in years and years because we haven't had the snow. So let's start thinking about our own places to describe in great detail something specific we love about life on Earth. Just, you know, connect with your five senses. What do you see? What can you smell? How does it feel on your hands or your feet? Who shares the experience with you? When does it happen? How does it stir your heart or your mind? Okay, so what do we savor? And so now we're going to share each other. John's going to put us into breakout rooms. There'll be 2 or 3 people in each of these breakout rooms. So the youngest and oldest will share what they love about life on Earth that may be threatened by climate change. And when you get into your breakout room, go around the room quickly, introduce your name, and give your age. We don't care if you make your age up, by the way. Then the youngest person jumps right in to share first. And after 1 minute, the older person stares up to share. So, you know, we'll just give a few minutes for this. John will let you know when it's time to switch. And a Zoom pop-up message, it will ask you to come back into the main room as a warning, but you could decline that offer and enjoy the final time on it. And the Zoom will bring us right back to the main room once the countdown stops. It may sound complicated, but trust me, you'll figure it out. So, John, are you ready for the breakouts?
We are all set, Don, and there are instructions in the chat for you guys.
Okay, great. So let's go to our breakouts.
Have fun, everyone.
If you see the word join in front of you, click on it.
pause recording here. 4 minutes.
Okay. Looks like Joy Moore needs someone to join her. Frank and Vincent have not gone in there. You could also just move someone from a 3-room into there for the time being.
Let's see.
Okay, over
Hey,
to you,
guys.
Curtis.
Well, welcome back, and I hope you all enjoyed that as much as I did. And since we've shared our personal stories with each other, we'd like to share a story that Marshall Saunders, our founder, heard at a sermon he attended to his church about 20 years ago. 13 years ago, Marshall included a part of that sermon at the very first climate advocacy training that he conducted, and I'm going to read that to you now. Quote, during his Apollo mission in 1969, astronaut Rusty Schweickart was let out of his capsule on an umbilical cord. Now, usually NASA keeps those astronauts busy up there, but a peculiar thing happened to Schweickart. As he emerged from his capsule, both Mission Control in Houston and the astronauts on the space shuttle had to concentrate on a problem, and this left Rusty all alone, floating around in space, looking at Mother Earth. Now, during this time, he had 2 profound conversion experiences. One, he looked back at our planet, quote, a shining gem against a totally black backdrop, and realized that everything that he cherishes was there. Family, his land, his music. He was so overcome that he wanted to, quote, hug and kiss it like a mother does her firstborn child. Compassion flowed through him. Now, he was trained as a jet pilot, but a breakthrough of something bigger came over him in that moment. His second awakening in space was a political one. He has been an American who has always been taught and believed that the world was divided into communist and free. And yet, while floating around there, he observed that the rivers flow on this planet indiscriminately between Russia and Europe, India and China, that ocean currents serve communists, socialists, and capitalists alike. Clouds do not stop at the borders, and there are no nations. Now, on returning to NASA, Schweickart was not debriefed by any spiritual leader about these mystical experiences that he had. And he confesses that he kind of wandered around in a state of stupor for 6 months, bumping into walls, asking himself, why did God do this for me? And finally concluded he did it through him so that others might have a message. And what message was that? Compassion, independence, and appreciation for the shared beauty that we all have for the planet on which we live. This holy earth, we must take care of it. It takes care of us. This side of heaven, we are each of us so nearly all that the other has. There is darkness all around us, and yet between us, there's enough light to get by. Now, Mary is going to talk to us about our vision, and then we'll move on for our core values.
Well, our vision at CCL is to create the political will for a livable world. And Curtis is going to tell us a little bit more about that.
Now, since this mission to create political will, our political will is to create and pass a carbon tax and dividend at the national level. And the definition of that by one think tank is this: political will is a decision that occurs when a sufficient set of decision makers, in this case, our members of Congress, commonly accept a potentially effective solution to a commonly perceived problem. So that means commonly accept perceived solution to a common problem. Now, we know the politicians don't create this on their own. Politicians, by and large, don't lead. They listen to us and then react to what we say. And so it's our job as citizens to tell them what to do. And if we citizens don't do that, the default are lobbyists who have vested interests. In DC, for example, there are 4 paid energy lobbyists for each member of Congress. And when you realize there are 500 members of Congress, that's over 2,000 of these people. Now, luckily, Congress wants to listen to us citizens as opposed to them because they listen to those guys every day. What we do is, after our decades of organizing, is to learn and apply what we've learned from many others, which creates this political will. We give politicians a specific plan. We want a sustainable economy and climate, but we give them a way to achieve it. We organize ourselves by congressional district. This is the most effective and efficient way to convey our message. We empower others to talk to those congressmen. And oh, by the way, we right now have 2 openings for liaisons here in Tennessee, which we really need for 2 of our congressmen. And finally, we give a specific approach that you will use and volunteer with us. So we ask you as CCL volunteers to take actions that we know that have the greatest chance of working so that we don't waste your valuable time. Next slide, please.
So let me tell you about breakthroughs. That's part of CCL's missions, to empower individual, personal, and political breakthroughs. And I have seen so many wonderful breakthroughs with amongst our Tennessee folks. I could tell you stories for hours, but I'm not gonna. But let's think about these breakthroughs. We all live in our comfort zone. In the place where we are comfortable living and where we know how to do, and we've learned our comfort zones. We've learned, how to drive a car without having to think about every little step of it, without all the muscle memory. But what we do in CCL is, what we try to do is we try to stretch that out. It's that gray, fuzzy area where we're learning new skills. It might be someone who never wrote an op-ed before for a newspaper, who never lobbied a member of Congress before, who never talked to a business owner about climate before, and all these other things. And it's in that comfort, in that expansion, that's the growing edge. That's where the magic happens, and that's where the power is. And then the next thing you know, that your comfort zone has now expanded. And that in CCL is how we grow. And really, that's at the core. That is at the bottom of how we are going to solve the climate crisis. So what we do, and we'll talk a little bit about our methodology. And so how are we going to achieve this? We get ourselves organized in communities across the country. Our volunteers work as teams within local chapters. Here in Tennessee, we have our Northeast chapter, our Knoxville chapter, our Nashville chapter, our Williamson County chapter, our Memphis chapter, and then we have a Tennessee at-large chapter, which has everyone else in the state in it. And then within our chapters, we divide and conquer. So we focus on 5 areas of political will, political leverage. They say you have a lever long enough, you could move the world, and that's literally what we must do. And those 5 levers are lobby Congress, media relations, grassroots outreach, grass tops engagement, group development, and organizing. So we're going to take a look at these and kind of go through them. So first off, lobbying Congress. Members of Congress want to know what voters want, and they encourage their DC staff to meet with us to learn about local thinking on national policy. They also expect staff in their local offices to maintain relationships with constituents and encourage those meetings too. Sometimes members of Congress directly meet with us. This March, a couple months ago, 406 virtual meetings that our volunteers organized included members of Congress in those meetings. So with those averages, we think that means they like us. So if you join a lobby team, you and a small group of CCL volunteers will meet virtually with your member of Congress and staff throughout the year. Policy staff understand policy issues. Local staff understands the personalities of their boss. Relationship in both offices help. And you're basically, when it comes down to, you can ask them two things. Would they co-sponsor a carbon pricing bill or one of our supporting ask bills? And who do they need to hear from in order to sense a growing desire for their leadership on climate solutions? And what you discover or discern can help your chapter customize its work within the levers of media, grassroots, and grass tops. So we also have a role called liaison, which Curtis mentioned earlier. And a CCL liaison is someone who is representative for CCL when the groups contact a congressional staffer. We don't want all of us calling that congressional staffer. They're busy, they're drinking life through a fire hose. And we just want them to build a relationship with one of our members. That's our liaisons. And since there are 535 members of Congress, CCL's goal is to have a personal liaison for each of those offices and their staff. The liaison builds ongoing relationships with their members of Congress, their staff, by maintaining personal and regular contact and by coordinating the group's meeting and communication with that office. This can be anything from sending a card when your member experiences a significant event, updating the office with timely resources related to climate change, sharing locally published op-eds with them, or even inviting the staff to a local barbecue. We are working on complex issues, and climate change is so complex, and so for having one consistent point of contact with the office of each member of Congress makes our process of communicating about climate change and our solutions so much more effective. It really, really does. And the liaison is the representative for the CCL chapter. And here the liaison has the goal of moving the member of Congress towards supporting the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. And here's an important point of clarification. Even though we have a liaison, each volunteer is encouraged to personally write and call their members of Congress, and do so frequently. And John could even put in a link for working with Congress for you. Okay. And I want to do one note. It's important to in our relationships that members of Congress in their offices, that the confidentiality that we expect from our volunteers. They really want to know when they're talking with us, it's not going out to the world. They're talking with us. This is a relationship, a two-way street. So it's essential that we don't repeat outside or share notes or emails of what we hear in the meeting. We leave it to the member of Congress, and even if they're vocally enthusiastic to make any public statement about climate, the public statements we share like crazy. But what we hear in their office with them privately, we hold on to that. Bottom line, whether it is a seemingly casual question about policy details or any other private comments, it is critical to train ourselves to respect what is said in confidence. And when we consistently demonstrate we can be trusted in this way, it really opens doors for deeper conversations that could move members forward. So, Mary?
The next lever is media. A member of Congress cares about what newspapers print and what gets covered on TV and the radio, what the radio says about them. On the media team, your media strategy will address the political realities of your district or state. If you have large rural areas, you may target small rural newspapers with your letters to the editor and op-eds. A small team might meet with the editorial page editor to seek endorsements of the next bill. Or you might pitch a story to a newspaper or TV station about something interesting that a chapter member or a local respected leader has done, especially calling for action on climate. And then you can tie that human interest story back to the bill. Don?
So members of Congress understand that every phone call, email, or letter they receive on an issue represents many others with the same concern. And staffers tell us that a steady daily drumbeat of calls and emails make a big impact on their bosses. So we want to give voice to the 66%. A 2019 study from the Yale program on climate change communications said that 2/3 of Americans are at least somewhat concerned about climate change. Grassroots volunteers recruit people to call their members of Congress on a monthly basis. We call this the monthly calling campaign. We'll be giving you the link for that later. With COVID, we've gotten creative. We aren't out at community events these days tabling. Instead, we work through our own list of friends, family members, neighbors, coworkers, and others. And we ask them just to commit to calling one day each month. And
Now-
Curtis?
Now, our next lever, in addition to grassroots and media, is grass tops. Members of Congress consistently tell us that they want to hear from local respected leaders in addition to us rest of us citizens. Members of Congress trust these individuals and turn to them for advice and guidance in policy areas. Individual voices of these local leaders have a disproportionate impact upon their Congress. That's why we seek their support as endorsers. This is the lever of grass tops. And if you join a grass tops team, you will work with volunteers doing various tasks, such as researching what possible endorsers we might find, building a relationship with them, much like we build a relationship with the member of Congress, nudging them to speak directly to their member of Congress. Now, you may ask your lobby team for guidance to whom you might obtain an endorsement. And they'll probably suggest small businessmen or community leaders with which you have a personal contact. One of the biggest things that we can do as individuals is to approach a small business owner that we know and ask for the endorsement. And we have a business climate leaders action team that can help you with these sorts of things. Our Grass Tops team has been very successful in doing this on a national scale. We have over 2,500 endorsements right now of the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. This is very, very significant.
So I'm going to come back to grassroots now for a second. So grassroots volunteers, they really also help lay the groundwork so we can achieve more success when it comes to grass tops, media, and lobbying. They are incredibly important. Our presentations play an important role in grassroots. Our presentation volunteers work as a team. Some volunteers line up presentations. You know, you might never want to go and get in front of an audience, but you might be willing to help schedule, and that's more important in many cases. Our volunteers give presentations, and other volunteers might manage the networking opportunities from these events. Almost all of us speak informally to our friends, family, neighbors, coworkers, giving micro presentations, including finding creative ways to reach potential supporters online. And we all help educate, persuade, and build a vocal majority of citizens that will empower Congress to move forward on climate. And this work continues despite the pandemic. Our presenters and schedulers action team has wonderful resources to help show you how to do this. Mary?
Finally, let's take a look at group development. The group development team welcomes and orients new volunteers, inviting them to join specific projects in the other levers. On this team, you may call chapter members to check in on projects and remind people of upcoming meetings. These folks organize social gatherings in person or on Zoom. Our director, Mark Reynolds, says we're betting the ranch on relationships, and that includes the relationships we have with each other. Our work in CCL finds its footing in our core values: focus, optimism, relationships, personal power, integrity, diversity, and nonpartisanship. All of us in CCL help to keep those core values alive in any of the work we're doing and in all of the levers. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Don.
Okay, thank you, Mary. We know that what assets and strengths each of us can bring to the table. And the more we know and we share that, the better we can organize effectively and pleasantly. You know, for example, if you ask me to manage a database, I will, but that's not the thing I really love to do. On the other hand, if you ask me to present a workshop, I will do it happily, especially if I could work with a team like Curtis, Mary, and John. So best to send me out to speak to Rotary clubs on Zoom and find me a partner who can track in a database to which club I'm speaking to next and what connections would be made from those talks. So we want you to consider what you would like to do and not do. So our next slide is going to give you a link to a volunteer inventory Google form. So you're going to go to the link and take 4 minutes to fill it out the best you can. If you want more time, you could finish it up later, but this will help you and our group leaders identify how you can pitch in the best and be part of the solution. Filling it out is not a commitment, but rather a form of active introspection. So when Mary and Curtis filled out the form, they were able to do it in 4 minutes. So, and then after that, we're going to take a 5-minute break, but with a quick little photo opportunity right before that. So let's see, John, so if you could put the link in the chat, please, for everybody. And, so think about what makes you feel good. What skills can you share? Take 4 minutes. Go to this link that John just put in the chat. It's the bit.ly/volunteer_inventory. If you could just click on that in the chat, go to it, take 4 minutes. John, you're going to set up a 4-minute timer for us now and get this timer going. There we go. Okay. And thank you all. Hope everyone's good and stretched out. Curtis, we're over to you.
Well, thank you, Don. And here on the screen, you have Mahatma Gandhi and General Jan Smuts. And just in just a minute, I'll get to them. What I want to tell you is that Citizens Climate Lobby sets itself apart from other organizations by building ongoing positive relationships with the community and with members of Congress. We want to commit this political space and the political will that allow members of Congress to get to passing carbon fee and dividend, the CDA rather. So when we talk about relationship building, what does it look like? And I'm going to give you an example between Gandhi and General Smuts. Now, you may know the story behind Gandhi's efforts to convince the British to end their colonial rule of India. But before that, Gandhi fought for the rights of Indians or South Asian Indians in South Africa. This brought him right into contact, who was the head of the Transvaal government in South Africa, General Jan Smuts. And when they met, Gandhi quietly told the general, "I have come to tell you that I'm going to fight against your government." And laughing, Smuts said, "Oh, really? Do you have anything else you want to tell me?" Gandhi said, "Yes, I'm going to prevail." And Smuts says, "Well, how are you going to do that?" So Gandhi smiles and says, "With your help." And years later, Smuts admitted this is exactly what he did. They had developed a relationship, and Gandhi, by his courage and determination, and by his refusal to take advantage of him, so of any opportunity he had, but by his endless capacity to stick it out, not yielding and without retaliation, he managed to win the general's respect, and in 1914 had the laws most offensive to South Asian Indians in South Africa repealed. Their basic civil rights were restored back into law. So Don will tell us about CCL's methodology.
So years ago, people told us there was no way we can get Republicans to sponsor a resolution in Congress that said that climate change is real, significantly influenced by humans, and that Congress should do something about it. We chose to see that possibility and worked with Representative Gibson to introduce the first Republican climate resolution. 6 years ago, people told us there was no way that we can get Republicans and Democrats to sit down together, much less form a caucus with the word climate in its title. We chose to see that possibility and worked with Representatives Deutsch and Curbelo to create the Climate Solutions Caucus, which at the end of 2018 had 90 members, 45 Republicans and 45 Democrats, working together to talk about solutions and address one of the most pressing issues of our time. And even earlier, 4 years ago, people told us it was impossible to believe that Republicans and Democrats would be willing to co-sponsor and introduce significant carbon pricing legislation together, as it hadn't happened in over a decade. And we chose to see that possibility. And today, the monumental Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act is a direct result of the 10 years of CCL's volunteers' efforts with all of our members of Congress. So we've explored our values and your values, and we've talked about our 5 levers of political will and how we're going to use them across chapters. But how do we inspire Congress to lead? How do we get people to join us in helping Congress find its way forward on this? How do we get those conversations? Mary, over to you.
That's a great question, Don. I have a poem by John Fox. He teaches poetry for healing, and I love what he says about relationships. When someone deeply listens to you, it's like holding out a dented cup you've had since childhood and watching it fill up with cold, fresh water. When it balances on top of the brim, you are understood. When it overflows and touches your skin, you are loved. When someone deeply listens to you, the room where you stay starts a new life, and the place where you wrote your first poem begins to glow in your mind's eye. It's as if gold has been discovered. When someone deeply listens to you, your bare feet are on the earth, and a beloved land that seemed distant is now at home within you. So this poem reminds me that when someone feels heard, they feel at home, at ease, and open. That's the place where everything is possible. Maybe you've heard the terms reflective listening or motivational interviewing. The basic sequence runs like this. First, we show appreciation for the person. Second, we reflect back and confirm what we think they said. Third, we identify and confirm their values. Fourth, find common ground with those values. And finally, we ask permission to express our thoughts related to those shared values. When it comes to making connections, these tools get us much further than simply repeating the same ideas over and over or shutting down and walking away. If we want to connect with someone, we need to listen first and find common ground. Now, Curtis is going to help us practice this.
Okay, so let's try taking ourselves through these listening steps. And the first one is to appreciate the other person for bringing up what it is they wish to talk about. For example, a question that we might hear when talking about the Energy Innovation Act is, what about underserved communities? Won't they be negatively impacted? They're certainly suffering from COVID now. So I invite each of you all right now to use the chat and please share ideas of how you might respond to this. First, we start with appreciation to set the tone for the person you're interviewing or trying to talk to, and hopefully divide or drop the defensiveness that this person may feel. So in the chat right now, write how you might appreciate the other person. Don wrote, I'm so glad you shared that. And Beth wrote, I love that you care about underserved communities. You might also say, thanks for bringing that up. I'm glad you asked. Sherry says, I understand your concerns. These are all really good things that can help appreciate that that other person has engaged you. Now, Mary will tell us about how we reflect upon what we may have heard after we've appreciated the other individual.
Thank you. Okay, so we appreciated the person. Next, we're going to reflect and confirm. We're going to reflect back and confirm what we think we heard them say. Now, they ask about underserved communities already suffering from COVID, and they expressed worry that the Energy Innovation Act would harm those communities already suffering. Using your own words in the chat, tell them what you heard them say and ask them to confirm or correct you. For example, you could say, Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I heard you say, or if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying, and you can go ahead and type that in the chat now. It sounds to me like you think, have I got that right? So go ahead, put it in your own words and populate the chat. Thanks, Stacy. Stacy says, what I'm hearing is, or what I hear you saying. Great.
Mary Ellen said, I hear that you're concerned about underserved communities. Is that right?
Perfect. It sounds to me that you want a climate solution that addresses underserved communities. You all have got this. Next slide.
Okay.
Now, thanks everyone for using the chat. This time, we want you to confirm with that person a value that you heard them say. You heard them say, what about underserved communities? Won't they be negatively impacted if they're already suffering from COVID? You might say in reaction to that, I'm hearing you express a commitment to economic justice. Is that right? Let's put some ideas about how we could confirm what we just heard in the chat. Rick Phelps says, I understand that job losses are a great concern to you. Patrice says, I'm glad we share concerns about economic justice. I might say, economic justice is of great importance to me as well, and I think that you feel that way. Nancy Morris says, thank you, concern about the other health of our citizens. Don added, you want to make sure we don't solve climate change on the backs of our most vulnerable. Denise says, we're on the same page. I hear your empathy for underserved communities. These are all really good responses to identify the value that you commonly hold with that individual. Mary, what do you think about finding common ground?
Well, this is the best part. Now that you've identified their values and you've confirmed them, tell them you share or respect their values. And some of you all already did that in the chat. You could simply say, I also care about economic justice. So it's chat time again. This is the easiest one. This is where you get to build that bridge. Type in your sentence based on the value that you identified with. I like that. Economic and environmental justice matter to me too. Concern for all communities is so important to me as well. I also care about environmental justice to ensure that underserved communities are cared for in any climate solution. That's just perfect. You guys you're already experts at this. I think you've done it before. All right, Curtis.
Now, in our final step in active listening and interaction, we ask permission before we share our own thinking on this particular point. Now, on the last step, we said, I value economic justice. I was pleased to discover that the co-sponsors actually addressed that with the mechanics of how the EICDA will affect economic justice. May I share that with you about how it does it? So let's go back to the chat. In your own words, say something like, in a way to ask permission, I'm glad to learn that the Energy Innovation Act addresses your concern, which is mine as well. Can I share with you what the bill says? So let's give that an opportunity right now. Give it a shot here. Jeff says, please talk about how to reflect what you've learned that doesn't say economic justice. The physical disabled like myself and my dad deserve a voice in a capitalistic society. I heard about a climate solution that may address your concern about economic justice. Can I share it with you? May I share with you how this bill addresses both of our concerns? Mary says, I recently learned about a way we can address both. Would you like to hear it? These are all good ways of responding and showing how the bill affects the common or addresses the common concern that you both have identified. Now, Don's going to tell us how the bill addresses this solution.
So we know the solution. If the problem is too many greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, then the solution is to stop putting them in the atmosphere and keep those fossil fuels in the ground. Now, economists tell us that if you want to make something and get rid of something, the fastest way to do so is to make it more expensive. They point to the example of cigarette smoking. About 50% of Americans used to smoke. Now it's in the teens. Making carbon pollution more expensive or accountable for its cost is what's really meant by carbon pricing. You know, experience with other taxes on behavior tells us that getting people to break their addiction to fossil fuels, well, it's not going to be an easy task, whatever the policy tools, but consider the success of tobacco taxes in cutting smoking in the face of real substance addiction. The National Cancer Institute and the World Health Organization concluded in 2016 a substantial body of research which has accumulated over many decades and from many countries shows that the significant increase in the excise tax and price of tobacco products is the single most consistent effective tool for reducing tobacco use and significantly increases in tobacco taxes and price used by leading is really what is causing users to quit, preventing potential users from initiating use and reducing consumption amongst users. So this is like really price is a big thing. In this case, it's not just people's behavior that we're looking at, but also businesses' behavior and and how they react as well. So let's talk about the Energy Innovation Carbon Dividend Act, right? Powering America forward to clean energy. So right now, this legislation, we currently now, or at least as of April 19th, it might have gone up a little bit, have 40 co-sponsors already for this bill, which is awesome. And you'll see that we have one here in Tennessee right now from Memphis, Democrat Steve Cohn, and our goal is to get all of our members of Congress on board. And we have work cut out to do with us. But let's talk about how this legislation works, first off. What it does is it puts a price on carbon at the source, at the well, at the mine, at the port of entry. And that price starts off relatively low, $15 per metric ton of CO2 equivalent. And then it goes up $10 per year every year. So it starts off low, so it doesn't really stress the economy, and then it goes up every single year, $10 per metric ton of CO2 equivalent. And by CO2 equivalent, we mean methane, which has a much, much greater impact on the greenhouse gas than CO2. It makes it so it takes a look at that. So less than a ton of methane. Matter of fact, it's about 100 to 1 is the difference on that. So it's looked at that way. Once that money comes in, that fee, then the next thing that happens, it returns 100% of those net proceeds to American households. Okay, and there's a full share per adult, half share for kids. And then the other piece on it, goods imported from other countries that don't have a similar price on carbon have to pay a border adjustment fee. In other words, we want our businesses to stay competitive. And so if a company is working in an economic climate where they don't have as much cost because they have a lower price on fossil fuels, we want to make sure selling in this country won't hurt our companies in the process. That's what that border adjustment is about. In fact, Europe's already talking about a similar carbon border adjustment, and the best way the U.S. would have to not pay that is to have our own border adjustments. So let's talk about the benefits of this as well. Okay, this bill will help us get to net zero by 2050. It'll reduce America's fossil fuel pollution by 30% in the first 5 years alone. And then it'll get us down to net zero by 2050. It's the single most powerful tool we have. Affordable clean energy. With this policy, the government makes fossil fuels more expensive and businesses compete to provide energy solutions. The resulting innovation will reduce our pollution fast and efficiently, leading to plenty of reliable and affordable clean energy for our modern lives. It saves lives. This policy will improve health and save 4.5 million American lives over the next 50 years by reducing what Americans breathe. You know, I know my daughter has asthma, and so many other people know folks with asthma. And this poor air quality is responsible for as many as 1 in 10 Americans today being sick, and sickens thousands more. And the policy also, it puts money in your pocket. This policy is affordable for ordinary Americans because it puts money in our pockets. And we'll talk a little bit about each one of these things. So net zero, this policy will reduce Americans' carbon pollution, as I said, 30% in the first 5 years alone. You know, this is more than any other regulation proposal that is out there is calling for right now. It's the single most powerful tool we have because it works economy-wide. It's not just the power sector. It's not just cars. It's economy-wide. It gives us affordable clean energy. With this policy, the government sets a direction, and then businesses respond to it. And they compete. It sets the market signal. They respond to it. And so this clean energy innovation, it's really going to move us faster towards net zero pollution. That's where we need to be. And it will improve the health. We've already mentioned it'll save 4.5 million American lives over 50 years by reducing pollution with what Americans breathe. We know poor air quality is responsible for as many as 1 in 10 American deaths today and sickens thousands more. And, you know, there are places in our country where really poor communities are feeling the brunt of this much more so than anybody else. So this really is economy-wide, so it helps all of our communities. It puts money in everyone's pocket. Money is collected from the fee given as a monthly dividend or carbon cashback. It's payment to every American to spend with absolutely no restrictions. You can spend it on whatever you want. You want to insulate your home? Great. You want to buy an electric car? Awesome. You want to go to Tahiti? That's your choice. You can do that too. Most low and middle Americans will come out financially ahead or break even with this policy. On year 10 of this plan, a family of 4 would receive $2,974 in dividends. And what I love is this policy creates jobs. You know, an investment in clean energy today will lead to approximately 3 times as many jobs as investments in fossil fuels. And we think this is awesome. You know, it's not only just clean energy jobs, there's also Main Street jobs too. You know, because we know when we're putting money in people's pockets, they're spending it on things they need at home, for clothing, for food, to fix their house. So it's going to be Main Street jobs as well. It's going to keep businesses healthy. You know, businesses prefer a carbon price over other climate solutions because they remain financially stable. while they adjust their operations, and thanks to a predictable and gradually rising price on carbon. They will not lose time or spend extra money trying to understand complicated new regulations and rules and incorporate them into their plans. They don't have to worry about one state has this policy, another state has that policy. It makes it all good all around. And then on a strong economy, our price on carbon is really the best climate solution for America's economy because it is the most cost-efficient way to lower America's pollution. To match its impact, multiple regulations across economic sectors would be needed and at an additional cost of hundreds of billions of dollars every year to the American economy. Net climate and health benefits on carbon taxes are estimated at $800 billion each year. If we fail to take climate action, economists estimate that global health could fall by 25% by 2100, with an increased number of Americans falling into poverty. And we don't want to see that happen. This is why we really think this important legislation. It's so important. Listen, it's not a silver bullet. There are no silver bullets, but it's the first best step that we could take. And now what we want to do is we want to take 5 minutes here and we want to be able to answer your questions. If you will go ahead and put your hand up in Zoom, you can go to raise hand and it's either going to be under participants or under reactions, depending upon your Zoom version. We'll unmute you. You could ask a quick question. You can also put the questions in the chat real quick. We'll read them and we'll answer them the best we can. And questions that we can't get to during this 5 minutes, which I'm going to start in a second, get them in the chat and we will make sure we get back to you with answers to them. So let's hear your questions. And once again, if you want to put your hand up, we'll unmute you. And otherwise, we will, and don't just raise your hand like this. We can't see you. If you put up your Zoom hand, or just put your, put it up in there. So I'm going to go over to Beth first. So Beth.
Yeah, I love the Energy Carbon and Innovation Act. I've just wondered sometimes when I read in the press and all, is there any negotiation where the dividend could go toward either innovations like developing carbon capture or even more focused help? You know, we were talking about environmental justice, more focused help for underserved communities to, you know, build more infrastructure. I'm just curious if there are alternatives to just giving it back to the people.
Sure, and the legislation, it's really 100% of the net revenues does go back to people, but legislation goes through the sausage-making process of Congress. So it's possible things that come in. What we are, as an organization, is concerned of is a carbon tax could easily become regressive if it's used for other purposes. And as soon as we start opening up a whole lot of different other purposes other than giving it back to Americans and letting them decide how to spend it, it's going to open the floodgates for other things that people want to do. They want to use it for to give it back to corporations. They want to use it to lower corporate taxes or other kinds of things, or instead of increasing tax on the wealthy. So right now, our position is to keep it at 100% goes back to members, but goes back to Americans. But once again, almost anything could happen in in that process. How about over to Charlene Bennett now? Charlene, you got to unmute yourself.
Okay. I want to follow up on a question I saw in the chat earlier about where this carbon tax has already been implemented. And are there any successes to use as models?
Sure, that is a great question, Charlene. So our neighbor to the north, Canada, already has a carbon fee and dividend system in. It has successfully passed a Supreme Court case there. It's been accepted now by some of the conservative ones. Curtis, you want to jump in here?
Yeah, there's data from British Columbia in the Vancouver area where they've had a carbon fee in place for a number of years. Their price is at about $25 a ton. the fee or the ultimate fee for the Carbon Dividend and Innovation Act is close to $50 a ton. And the people in British Columbia have had a 16 to 19% reduction in their emissions since 2005, despite a significant growth of approximately 20% in their population. So that's a pretty good hefty reduction.
Thank you.
Well, great. John, any in the chat that we want to get to right now?
Let's see. There was a question about any Republicans on board yet.
Okay, not yet on this bill. We've had the last two Congresses that it's been introduced. We've had Republican co-sponsors, and so not yet because Representative Deutsch felt that it was imperative that this legislation get introduced before President Biden started talking about his plans. We want to make sure that a price on carbon is part of that plan, and this gives us the space and time to be able to do that. However, Representative Deutsch is completely open to having Republicans on board and is willing to negotiate with them about different pieces in the legislation to make that happen. So we hope to get them on board both in the House and in the Senate.
Noel asks, what other groups do you partner with to reach more people? Like, for example, Sierra Club, Pachamama Alliance, Eco Justice Organizations, or CCL Standalone?
Sure, and we do work with many different organizations. CCL has what's called the Big Tent. It's a webinar that happens periodically where we bring in people from other organizations that we work with. Also, if you go to energyinnovationact.org, John could put that in the chat for you, which will tell you all about this legislation. Go to the supporter section, and it'll give you statements from organizations, including the Nature Conservancy, including Trout Unlimited, and many others in there that talk about this. I wish we had more time for questions right now, but get them in the chat and we will try to get back to people via email afterwards, or John will answer them in the chat for you while we're going and moving ahead here. But we want to keep moving because we want to be able to respect your time. So let's talk a little bit about laser talks, Curtis.
Yes, I'd be happy to, Don. Now, you and your chat have had specific questions for us. And so the question is that if you get one of those questions from someone with whom you're talking, where would you go to find an answer to that particular question? And so CCL's laser talks are bite-sized advocacy resources that are the heart at which we can become effective advocates. Each talk is brief and it focuses on one aspect of our issue. And you can practice them because you'll have frequently asked questions when you do talk to people. There's a link to that. And I think John could put that in the chat because I can't do it at the moment. And so Mary's going to tell us a little bit more about the effects of the Carbon Innovation and Dividend Act.
Mary, you're muted.
Thank you. I'm going to read you our laser talk on the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, and John's got it in the chat. The Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act will reduce America's carbon pollution by 30% in the first 5 years and is the single most powerful tool we have to get us to net zero by 2050. It puts a fee on carbon pollution, creating a level playing field for clean energy. This policy is affordable for ordinary Americans because it puts money in your pocket. The money collected from the fee is given as a monthly dividend or carbon cashback payments to every American to spend with no restrictions. Most low and middle income Americans will come out financially ahead or break even. The Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act will improve health and save 4.5 million American lives over the next 50 years by reducing pollution Americans breathe. Poor air quality is responsible for the deaths of as many as 1 in 10 Americans today and sickens thousands more. With this policy, the government makes fossil fuels more expensive, and businesses compete to provide clean energy solutions. The resulting innovation will reduce our pollution fast and efficiently, leading to plenty of reliable and affordable clean energy for our modern lives. So here's our chance to practice talking about the benefits of the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act before your lobby meeting. We're going to go to our breakout rooms again, and I want you and your partner to practice talking about the Energy Innovation Act. We'll use Dawn's same criteria that we used last time, with the youngest person going first. So the youngest person will take talking points 1 and 2, and the older person will take talking points 3 and 4. So we'll break out in pairs and give you 4 minutes. That's 2 minutes apiece. Now you're just going to say this in your own words. It's an excellent practice. John, do you have the breakout room set?
Yes, we are set. There's a couple of rooms that'll have 3 folks in, but that's okay.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, you all have fun talking about the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act.
All right, see y'all. See you shortly. Four minutes. Okay. Should be back.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Please share what stood out to you in the chat. Sometimes when we talk about these details, it really helps us to learn them. And now if you write it down in the chat, it's going to help to cement it even more. So take a moment and populate the chat with whatever stood out to you the most. What did you learn? And I'll read some of your responses.
What's a takeaway you may want to repeat again?
Oh yeah, okay. Go ahead and put what you've learned in the chat. What stood out to you during your conversation with your partner in the chat? I like this, framing things as a win-win-win for businesses, consumers, environment. Isn't that the best? Insight into some of the critiques that may come back. Excellent.
Great.
Think ahead, it helps us to know how to respond. The EICDA should speed the development of the grid. I always
The
say
electric grid. Yeah, right,
I
Mark.
always say tax, but we should say fee since it's giving it back to the people. It's a good insight.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well,
Anybody
excellent.
else? Any more nuggets?
Oh, look, hey, I did read this. We have a 16-year-old in our training today. You are so welcome in CCL. Our young people need us to invest in the future. That is so true. And CCL loves to have young, active members. We each need to reread the bill and internalize the information. That's true. And the more you do it, the more it helps. This person said they're impressed by their partner's participation in the Great Climate March and learning from our insight, scooped up so fast. Last one, saves lives as folks won't be living with asthma for life. We need healthy citizens. Oh, and we have another 16-year-old. Yay, that's wonderful.
Yay.
All right, thank you, everybody. You all are the best.
You guys are
Don's going to take us to our next section.
You guys are great. And so it is time to lobby. So this is, we're going to be doing a lobby role play. We'll be talking about what a lobby leader does. What are some of the roles that we play and how do we organize ourselves for our lobby delegations? We'll talk about a basic meeting outline, and then you're going to do a 40-minute breakout with your mentor and member of Congress. So just get ready, folks. This will be good. So first off, what do we do before our meetings? Now, first off, I want to let you know, if you've never done one of these climate advocate training workshops before, if you've never done a role play like this before, doing this, you will now be qualified to participate in one of our lobby delegations that we'll be setting up in June. So I'm glad you can be coming aboard with us because we need all of us on board. So this gives you your qualification. So prior to the meeting, we do a lot of research. Now, we don't have time to do all this research today, but we learn what our members are really proud of, what our representatives like, what our senators have accomplished. We learn what really annoys them, and so we try not to bring that up. We research local impacts of climate change. So many of you are incredibly well versed on that earlier today. We learn how the carbon fee and dividend will impact specific districts or states. We have reports on that called the Household Impact Study. So we know what it does really local, close to home. And then we'll also be reviewing precious meeting minutes, confidential minutes of earlier meetings with this member of Congress and their staff, so we know what other lobby delegations have learned in the past. We'll be determining ahead of time who's going to be responsible for the follow-up, who will be the leader, who will assign the roles, and we'll be talking about all of those roles like timekeeper and note taker and asker and all of these in a little bit. So let's start off with the leader. I like to use the analogy of that of an orchestra conductor. The CCL team leader is there to manage the meeting and not to dominate the meeting. The leader is not necessarily the one who talks the most. Matter of fact, we hope the member of Congress speaks the most, but the one who empowers everyone to share, participate, especially constituents. It's one of the things we love about virtual lobby meetings is that that's how you get, we have more constituents in the room with this than when we go up to Washington, D.C. During discussion, we ask open-ended questions, and we keep focused on opportunities to affirm shared values, give examples, ask clarifying questions. Am I hearing you say, and the leader really helps make sure this happens? The leader may choose to be in charge of handling the transition between different parts of the meeting, and they keep the conversation on track. They help wrap things up. And the leader will help the team set up an appropriate supporting ask for the meeting, something we're not going to do today, and make sure that everyone's on the same page with that. A supporting ask might be something that really supports our goal, like the Grow Climate Act or Climate Grow Act, which helps farmers and foresters take advantage of carbon markets. So that could be a supporting ask that we have talked about. So those are that's what the leader does. And your mentor, member of Congress, is going to ask one of you in your breakout teams to be that leader today. And I hope you just say yes. And then you're going to help pick the other roles in the meeting. So some of the other meeting roles is appreciator. Well, the appreciation, it makes you feel nice when you first meet someone and they say something nice about you. Doesn't that feel good? So how does it change the way you listen? So appreciator, their role is specifically to ask. It's not to ask, but to give an appreciation. I'll give you an example. We had a lobby delegation meeting with a Midwestern member of Congress, a Republican, and they came into the office and they were informed that the member of Congress could not meet with them that day, that he had been called away, and so they would meet with a staff member. And frankly, in Washington, that happens about half the time because members of Congress, their life is not their own. But so the group went in, they met with the staff member. They were sitting in one of these little cubicles in this office. House offices have lots of room dividers in them, and so they're around a little wooden table, sitting around talking with the staff member. And the appreciator was being grateful for the work this member of Congress had done in terms of protecting local wetlands in the district. And they showed how grateful they were for this appreciation. And when they started saying that, you hear a voice from back behind this room divider say, "Hey, I worked really hard on that, Bill." And the member of Congress who'd been standing back there walked around, sat down, and had a wonderful conversation with the group. And it turned out he'd just been yelled at by two other climate groups earlier in the week, and he didn't feel like getting yelled at a third time. So until he heard that appreciation, he wasn't coming out. So it can make a great difference. The ask is our time monitor. is someone who, first off, when they're introducing themselves, says, hey, we want to be respectful of your time. How much time do we have with you today? As simple as that. And about 5 minutes before the end of the meeting, 2 minutes in our meetings today, they'll say, hey, our time is almost up here. We need to begin wrapping things up. So everyone else knows we're staying respectful. But that time monitor does something else also. That time monitor really times how much do we talk and how much does that member of Congress talk. We want to target a 50-50. We don't want us talking and them going, That's not a conversation. So that time monitor tallies the number of open-ended questions that we ask and how much time we spoke versus they spoke. Note takers are incredibly important, and we like experienced people to be note takers who understand the process because we want to find out what is it these people are asking and talking about and be able to hold on to that in the minutes, the kind of minutes that you've already read about earlier meetings. A deliverer is someone on the team who's responsible for delivering constituent correspondence, messages from community leaders, locally published op-eds. We used to bring in large stacks of these constituent forms when we did this in person. With the pandemic, those might be verbally summarized or sent in advance or sent afterwards as part of a follow-up. Speaking of follow-up is one of the most important roles that we have to play. You don't say as much during the meeting. This lobby team member sends follow-up meeting material. Let's say they wanted a particular report. They'll send a thank you card. And they'll ask if they prefer the follow-up material to be hard copy or electronic. They'll coordinate with the liaison about following up on the meeting because it's really vitally important that the liaison or if that person is the liaison follows up on what that member of Congress said. I mean, members of Congress and staff members, they want us to feel heard. They want us to feel liked, and they want us to go away. So our follow-up person makes sure that if they said, well, we'll think about this legislation and get back to you. Oh, okay. How should I get back to you? How much time do you need? Well, get back to me in about a week. And in about a week, that person is getting a call back because once they understand will be politely persistent and not going away, they will give us a yes or a no. And either one of those is better than no answer at all. We also might have tech support, the person who's our Zoom host, who's taking care of muting, security, etc. We might have an observer, someone designated just to put aside any agenda for outcomes and just listen for underlying needs and suggest later on ways where we could do the meetings better in the future. And a photographer like Sherry did today, so we will record this and we can share it on social media if it's okay with the member of Congress. So those are the kind of roles that we play. Now, we typically, in person, will meet in teams of 4 to 6 CCL members. Today, I think we'll probably have about 6 or so in our delegations. Sometimes we have much larger meetings. So in our meetings, here's the basic outline. The beginning is we thank the member or staffer for meeting with us. The timekeeper asks, how much time do you have for the meeting? We introduce ourselves briefly. And if meeting with the staffer, we ask them to tell us a bit about themselves. We show appreciation for something they've done recently that you sincerely appreciate. Like if it's Marsha Blackburn, for example, you might appreciate that she really went out to protect musicians in Tennessee. And so it doesn't have to be related to climate. You explain our purpose to create political will for a livable world. And you will briefly state our request. Support or introduce legislation that puts a fee on carbon-based fuels and returns the net revenues to American households, and then mention that we have more to say about that, but first we'd like to discuss your concerns. So we have listening and discussion. The middle of it is this listening, discussion, and exchange of thoughts. We want to find out what they care about, and we're flexible here, and it's because this is about relationship building. For instance, rather than react to an answer, it's more important that we make them feel heard. So you might ask, so what, if you're talking to a staffer, for example, what might be preventing your representative from supporting our legislation? Or you might ask the member, who in your district would we really need to convince about the merits of our proposal to win your support? Or you might just ask, what plan do you prefer to lowering emission if they don't like this one? Let's find out where they're from. And, having done your research properly, we'll be able to anticipate what you think their responses might be. And then finally, we deliver our ask. We ask them if it's okay to tell them about the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. And then we go in, if they indicate they're not ready to support our policy, then we might introduce a secondary request as a building block. We offer additional materials and ask them if they'd like hard copy or electronic. We like to ask them who they work with on the other side of the aisle, because working bipartisan is so important. And we thank them for their time. So that's the basic outline over here. So we want you to plan your breakout. So John is going to be setting up some breakout rooms here, and this is how it's going to work. You're going to have 8 minutes to talk with your mentor for Q&A. Introduce yourselves briefly, and any questions you might have about CCL or about the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, you could ask your mentor. They may not know all the answers, but if so, they'll make sure that you get their email and you can find out more answers about it. Then we'll have 12 minutes that you, as a group with the leader leading it, that your team leader that's been picked, will prepare for your meeting. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to identify who is your mentor, what member of Congress are they going to be? A Republican House member, a Democratic House member, a Republican senator? Do you want them to be Marsha Blackburn? I think Curtis would look great as Marsha Blackburn. But you get to pick who your member of Congress will be, and then you're going to decide who will play what role and what's your basic meeting plan. So you'll have 12 minutes for that. And then you'll have actually 12 minutes to hold a meeting. Often our meetings are only 15, 20 minutes along with the members of Congress. A lot of time is busy, but 12 minutes will give you a really good feel of it. And then as a group, you'll debrief together as a group and talk with your mentor, who will be talking about how you did. And then we'll come back together. We'll share via chat some pieces of that as well. So, John, are you ready to create the groups?
We are all set.
Okay, so you're going to go into, and your member of Congress will have MOC in front of their name. They'll be able to share slides with you. So have a great breakout. John and I will pop around and join some of the rooms, but not to say anything, just to see how things are going as we're doing this. So here we go.
All right, have fun, everyone.
Someone's sharing. Who's sharing the screen here?
I think.
I think that's Shelly's screen.
All right, looks like folks are coming back into the room. Let's see. Looks like we might have everyone back. So welcome back, everyone. Wanted to just take a minute or two here to digest this whole workshop, think about what touched you and what spoke to you, and what made you look at something in a new way, and what did you hear with fresh ears. So if you could put in the chat something that stood out, share your take-home nuggets and things that will rattle around with you for a while. In Tennessee, we're doing some pretty cool things innovation-wise. Don, I think this might be the first climate advocate workshop led by a state. Our other co-coordinator for the state level, Jan Berry, did a pretty cool thing. She had 2 members of Congress in a lobby meeting at the same time last year, which was really cool. They met with Oak Ridge Laboratory experts. And the at-large chapter was a brand new innovation from Tennessee. And thanks to Don for that. And thank you, Mary, for leading that group. So, so if you could just share some things about this workshop today, that would be really helpful for us.
So Mark said we really clicked considering some of us were out of our comfort zones too.
Great.
Beth says, I'm really insightful experience as a member of Congress, Senator Blackburn. When Mark told me a personal story about his mom, I felt as if Marcia was being empathetic towards Mark. Role plays are so effective.
Mm. Mark says he spontaneously told a personal story about his mother.
Mm. Beth says, great to meet other folk who want to work on this issue. Mary Ellen said, we had a great lobbying group, standouts. Some 4 participants too came to the training from social media platforms, Facebook, and even NPR ads. I didn't even know we had NPR ads for this. Awesome.
That's excellent.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your feedback, everyone.
Thank you.
All right. So let's keep moving along over here. Let me see. I think it would have been great to have folks group by region. You know, in June at our national break meeting in June, which you can register for free. We'll get the link in there for you. We will have a Tennessee breakout. So anyway, here, let's go on to what's next. Mary, tell us about that, if you would.
Yeah, so what is next? First of all, we're going to briefly review how CCL is organized. Citizens Climate Lobby is volunteer driven. It's organized locally by chapters, and the terms chapter and group are used interchangeably. They mean the same thing. A group or chapter is a local team that's creating political will and clear evidence that citizens support action on climate change within that congressional district or within a state. CCL has hundreds of groups across North America, from cities like New York, Los Angeles, and Toronto, to Pocatello, Idaho, and Hattiesburg, Mississippi. We also have chapters across Europe, Australia, Africa, Asia, and Central America. And I think we have some people visiting with us from overseas today. Each chapter has a group leader or a couple of co-leaders who help organize and coordinate the local activities of the group. Groups might be in different stages of development, from just getting off the ground to being an established group with dozens of members. If you're new to CCL and haven't hooked up with your local chapter, we want you to do that as soon as possible. Here in the United States, each group belongs to one of 10 different regions, and each region has a regional coordinator, like John, who supports the group leaders in each of these geographic areas. Most states also have state coordinators, like Don, who also support the chapters. So to find your chapter, go to the main website and look for chapters under the About tab. We encourage new volunteers to seek out their group leader's contact information. Call that group leader, introduce yourself. It will make them so happy. You should be able to find this information from that email that Sarah sent you when you became a member. If you reach out to your local group leader and don't hear back, then contact one of us. Sometimes emails go to spam, and we can help make the introductions. If there's no group in your area, we will put you in touch with the at-large chapter, and nothing would make me happier. What else do we have, Don?
Well, John's going to put his email and my email in the chat for you. So if you can't connect, you can. But one thing you really want to know about is community. Now, CCL has actually 2 different websites, citizensclimatelobby.org, our outward-facing website, and community.citizensclimate.org, which is our inward-facing website. And this is an awesome website. It has all of the different skills, tools, resources that you are going to need, from who's coming up as our next monthly speaker, to new legislation that's being introduced, to how to do things. You know, how do you give a presentation? How do you schedule a meeting? How do you do grass tops outreach? How do you write a letter to the editor? You want an op-ed template? Mary and I have both had op-eds published, co-authored with our executive director, Mark Reynolds, in our papers that we got off of Community. There's so much in there. And if you ever want to find something in it, try search first. Try me second. I'm your librarian in Tennessee, okay? And I'm happy to show you where everything is if you can't find it yourself. So if you've never been to Community, do it. And one of the things that we have in Community is this action tracker. We like to track all the different things that we do here, including something like this meeting. So there'll be an action for this meeting that you can go in and say, hey, I did this. All of this stuff we add up, it's our metrics. It's like runs, hits, and errors in a baseball game. Okay, it's how we do it, and it also really helps CCL raise money from foundations by showing them how much awesome work we can do. And then one thing that we also have is called the Call Congress campaign. So Curtis, why don't you tell us about that?
This may be among the most important things that you can do as an individual member of CCL. Monthly, you call 1 to 3 of your congressional delegation, your representative, and 2 senators, or one of your senators, one of your representatives. And you speak usually to one of their staff person who's just on the phone recording the nature of the call. You can also leave a message most of the time if no one picks up. Now, CCL has a way to remind you to do this. And John can put in the chat what that is. It's cclusa.org/MCC. Easy to remember. I was going to spend a few minutes here to show you exactly what this looked like. You don't need to worry that the other guy on the phone that you get is going to ask you questions. All he's going to do is listen to you over about the 30 to 40 seconds that you speak to him. Can you imagine what it would look like if you were that person day after day, listening to 1 to 2 people call in to tell you to support this? Heck, eventually you do it too. Next slide, please.
Okay, thank you, Curtis. So we're coming to our closing here. We said we'd stop at 1, and we're going to, so really want to respect that. But in closing, I really want to say thanks to all of you for being here today. I applaud your courage for examining the climate crisis and for focusing on solutions. Thank you. I really want to wrap up by saying that really we're not an environmental group. We are at our core a group dedicated to democracy. We're dedicated to building the human relationships that enrich our lives and ensure we pass on that same democracy and a livable world that we inherited, not just to the next generation, but for every generation to come. You know, I really think Citizens Climate Lobby is simply an avenue for people to have their voices heard in the world and in their government. So what we invite you to is, sure, a group, a structure, an environment, a lot of practice, but mostly an avenue. We want to create an environment where your voice is as powerful as you could possibly make it. And I'd like to close today with a couple of quotes. One is from a favorite woman of mine, who is Eleanor Roosevelt, and she said, "Courage is more exhilarating than fear, and in the long run, it's easier. We do not have to become heroes overnight. We just take it a step at a time." And that's what we do. We take it a step at a time here at CCL, and we want you to step with us, and we want to step with you. And I'm going to just finish this up finally with just a reminder from a bumper sticker. When the people lead, the leaders will follow. And so that's our job. We're going to lead, folks. And thank you so much for being here. Feel free to connect with us. I'll be getting out information to everyone on Monday. I'll have a copy of this recording. I will have the links that we shared and ways that you can get involved, and feel free to ask for more information. That's why we're here, is to help for those breakthroughs, to empower each other. And so reach out to your group leader to confirm next steps for your lobby plan. If you didn't get a chance to finish out that the volunteer inventory, please do. I'll email out on Monday with all this information and the slides. And really, on behalf of Mary, Curtis, John, and our entire host committee, thank you for being here today, and thank you for being a climate advocate. So, John, can you unmute us all right now so we could just say goodbye to each other? And I'm going to stop my share so we could see each other too. All right. Okay, just unmute yourself. You all should be able to unmute yourself now.
Thanks,
Thank you all.
everybody.
All right.
If the MOCs
Thank
want to stay on the
you.
line.
Everyone,
Thank you.
thank you, guys. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Great job,
Bye-bye, all.
everybody.
Take care. Have a
Thank
great
you.
rest of your
Great.
weekend. You're awesome.
Go
Farewell.
Tennessee.
Time well spent.
Take care.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rick.
Bye.
That's all my,
Thank
that's
you all.
my Tri-City folks.
All right. Have a great weekend.
Have a good weekend, all.
He's here.
And if